The wrench slipped from my greasy fingers and clattered onto the concrete floor of my garage. It was past midnight, and I was elbow deep in the engine of my beat-up Chevy when I heard my wife Jenna's voice drifting through the thin walls from our kitchen. He's so clueless, he'd wear a shirt that says loser and think it's a compliment. Her laugh was sharp, cutting through the humid summer air like a blade. I froze, my hand still gripping the oil-stained distributor cap, and listened to her continue her phone conversation. No, Nina, I'm serious. Martin has no idea what's coming. After my promotion goes through, I won't need to pretend anymore. My name is Martin Graves, but everyone calls me Marty. I'm 50 years old, and until 6 months ago, I owned a small IT repair shop in our mid-sized Indiana town. The business went under when the big box stores started offering cheaper services, and now I spend my days fixing neighbors' cars in my garage for cash under the table. Yeah, but it'd be the only thing I've worn that fits anymore, I thought bitterly, wiping my hands on an already filthy rag. Jenna was 47, ambitious, and had just landed a senior position at Hartwell and Associates, the biggest advertising agency in our city. She'd been working late nights for months, claiming she was preparing for her new role. Now I was starting to understand what those late nights really involved. I crept closer to the door connecting the garage to our house, careful not to make any noise. The conversation was getting more interesting. Ethan says we should wait until after the company party next week. Make it look natural, you know? Like I just realized I deserve better. Ethan Beck. I knew that name. He was some hotshot junior executive at Jenna's agency, maybe 10 years younger than me, with perfect teeth and a gym membership he actually used. I'd met him at a few company functions, where he'd looked at me like I was something stuck to the bottom of his designer shoes. The best part is, Martin's parents absolutely adore me. They'll probably blame him for the divorce. She was right about that. My parents, retired and living in the same suburb, had always thought Jenna was too good for me. They'd probably throw her a celebration party when she finally dumped their disappointment of a son. I heard her footsteps moving toward the stairs, and I quickly retreated to my workbench, grabbing the wrench and pretending to be absorbed in my repairs. But my mind was racing. A company party next week? A plan involving Ethan Beck. And apparently, my wife thought I was too stupid to see it coming. Well, honey, I thought, maybe it's time to prove you wrong. The next morning, Jenna was all smiles and coffee kisses, acting like the perfect suburban wife. She was dressed in one of her new power suits, the kind that cost more than I used to make in a week at the repair shop. Don't forget about the promotion party Saturday night, she said, adjusting her makeup in the hallway mirror. It's going to be a big deal. The whole company will be there. Wouldn't miss it, I replied, forcing a smile. I'm so proud of you, babe. She gave me a quick peck on the cheek, and I caught a whiff of expensive perfume. New perfume, the kind you don't buy for your husband. After she left for work, I sat in our kitchen, drinking instant coffee and looking around at the life we'd built together. 23 years of marriage, and it was all about to come crashing down. Our daughter Sophie was away at college, probably posting TikTok videos about her dysfunctional family. The house felt empty, like a stage set waiting for the actors to return and finish the play. I spent the day doing odd jobs around the neighborhood, but my mind kept drifting back to that phone conversation. By evening, I'd made a decision. I was going to that party, and I was going to pay attention. Saturday night arrived with a kind of oppressive humidity that makes your clothes stick to your skin. The party was being held at the Riverside Country Club, the fanciest venue in town. I put on my best suit, which was about 5 years old, and showed it, and tried to look like I belonged. The club was packed with Jenna's coworkers, all of them young, successful, and speaking a language of marketing buzzwords that might as well have been ancient Greek. I grabbed a beer from the bar and found a corner where I could observe without being noticed. Jenna was in her element, working the room like a politician. She'd laugh at someone's joke, touch their arm, and move on to the next conversation. She was magnetic, I had to admit. It was one of the things that had attracted me to her in the first place, back when we were both young and stupid and thought love was enough. Then I saw Ethan Beck. He was everything I wasn't, tall, confident, with a kind of casual arrogance that comes from never having failed at anything important. He wore his expensive suit like it was casual wear, and when he smiled, it was like watching a toothpaste commercial come to life. I watched him work his way through the crowd toward Jenna, and when they met, the chemistry was obvious. Not obvious enough that anyone else would notice, but I was looking for it. The way their hands brushed when they reached for drinks. The way she laughed just a little too hard at his jokes. The way they stood just a little too close when they talked. "Martin! There you are." I turned to find my parents approaching, my mother beaming with pride and my father looking uncomfortable in his rented tuxedo. "Isn't this wonderful?" Mom gushed. "Our Jenna getting such an important promotion. You must be so proud." "Absolutely," I said, raising my beer in a mock toast. "She's really something special." Dad clapped me on the shoulder with the kind of forced enthusiasm that said he was trying to be supportive, but wasn't sure what to say. "You've got yourself a real winner there, son. Better hold on to her. If only you knew, Dad." The evening dragged on with speeches and toasts and the kind of corporate cheerleading that makes you want to set yourself on fire. Finally, the company president called for attention and announced Jenna's promotion to Senior Vice President of Creative Development. The crowd applauded, and Jenna stepped up to the microphone with a gracious smile. "Thank you all so much," she began, her voice carrying perfectly across the room. "This promotion means the world to me, and I couldn't have done it without the support of my amazing team." She went on to thank various colleagues, including Ethan, who she praised for his innovative thinking and collaborative spirit. Then, to my surprise, she mentioned me, and of course, I have to thank my wonderful husband Martin, who has been so supportive during this transition. "Honey, could you come up here?" Every eye in the room turned to me. I felt my face flush as I made my way through the crowd to the small stage where Jenna was waiting. She put her arm around my waist and pulled me close to the microphone. "Martin has been my rock through everything," she continued, and I could hear the practiced sincerity in her voice. "He's always been so understanding about my long hours and late nights, and to show my appreciation." She reached behind the podium and pulled out a gift box wrapped in silver paper. The crowd murmured with anticipation as she handed it to me. "Open it, honey." My hands were shaking as I tore off the wrapping paper. Inside was a black t-shirt, neatly folded. I held it up to read the white text printed across the front: "The loser of the house." The room erupted in laughter. People were pointing and taking pictures with their phones. I could hear someone say, "Oh my God, that's hilarious," and someone else respond, "She's got such a great sense of humor." I looked at Jenna, who was smiling like she'd just delivered the punchline to the world's funniest joke. In that moment, I understood that this wasn't just about her affair with Ethan Beck. This was about humiliating me in front of everyone who mattered in her professional world. This was about making sure that when she left me, everyone would understand why. I smiled back at her, and I could see the surprise in her eyes. She'd expected me to be embarrassed, maybe even angry. Instead, I leaned into the microphone and said, "Well, honey, at least now I know where I stand. Thanks for making it official." The crowd laughed even harder, thinking I was playing along with the joke. But inside, something had snapped. Something cold and calculating and absolutely furious. I folded the shirt carefully and tucked it under my arm. "I'll treasure this forever," I told her and kissed her cheek. As we walked off the small stage together, she whispered in my ear, "You're such a good sport, Marty. I knew you'd understand." Oh, I understand perfectly, I thought. The question is, do you? The party ended around midnight, but I couldn't sleep. Jenna went upstairs to shower, chattering about her new position. While the shower ran, I rifled through her purse and found a text preview on her locked phone. "Ethan, can't wait for tomorrow night. Same place?" Tomorrow was Sunday, her claimed late work night. The next evening she kissed me goodbye and said she'd be at the office until 10. 15 minutes after she left, I followed. Instead of the business district, I kept driving to a strip of chain restaurants and motels. Her car sat in the Sunset Inn lot beside a silver BMW I recognized as Ethan's. I sat for a long minute, then scratched Ethan's BMW with my keys, cut the other side, and used my pocket knife to put a slow leak in the front tire. I slipped a note under the wiper. "Congrats on your promotion, homewrecker." On the way out, I noticed a security camera and felt a flicker of panic. That night, Jenna came home late and acted exhausted. She took her phone upstairs. The next morning, an anonymous text arrived. "Nice job, loser. Hope you run as fast as you fix cars." Someone had seen me at the motel and knew details, the t-shirt from the party, maybe my truck. Over the following days, Jenna grew secretive. Phone calls in the other room, new clothes, a new haircut, a sudden gym membership. The anonymous messages kept coming. Insults, personal digs, details only someone close could know. I began to suspect Nina Walsh, Jenna's friend and HR director, who'd always disliked me and loved psychological games. I watched Nina's routine, followed her one afternoon to a coffee shop where she met Jenna. From across the street, their body language looked strategic, not friendly. After they left, Jenna walked toward the parking garage where Ethan's BMW was parked. They weren't hiding anything. Anger built. I wanted to confront them, but I went to O'Malley's instead and told Sam, the owner and ex-cop, what was happening. He didn't buy a spectacle. "They want you to snap," he said. "Document everything. Gather evidence. Don't give them the scene they want." He was right. Part of me wanted violence and exposure. Part knew patience and proof would win. I left Sam's with a beer and a plan. To stop acting like a detective driven by fury and start acting like one who could win this. But I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction. If they wanted to play games, I could play games too. and I was starting to realize that I might be better at it than they thought. Friday morning brought another anonymous text. Your wife looked really happy last night. Glowing, you might say. I was getting tired of the games. Whoever was sending these messages was clearly enjoying themselves, but they were also getting sloppy. The message had come through at 7:23 a.m., which meant the sender was probably getting ready for work. That narrowed down the possibilities. I spent the morning doing some research online, using the computer skills I'd developed during my years in the IT business. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. Nina Walsh had been posting regularly on social media about Jenna's promotion and success. But more interesting were her older posts, going back several years. There were subtle digs at me, comments about how Jenna deserved better, and photos from girls' nights out where the two of them looked like they were plotting something. But the real revelation came when I dug deeper into Nina's employment history. She'd worked at my IT repair shop for exactly 3 months, about 7 years ago. I'd fired her for stealing money from the cash register and lying about it. She'd threatened to sue me, but nothing had come of it. Now she was in a position to get her revenge, and she was using my wife to do it. I was still processing this information when Jenna came home from work, looking flustered and upset. Bad day? I asked, trying to sound concerned. You could say that, she replied, pouring herself a large glass of wine. Someone vandalized Ethan's car earlier this week, and now there are rumors going around the office about who might have done it. I kept my expression neutral. That's terrible. Any idea who would do something like that? She studied my face carefully. The security cameras at the motel where it happened were too far away to get a clear image, but they could see it was a man in dark clothing driving a pickup truck. Well, that narrows it down to about half the men in town, I said. I hope they catch whoever did it. Jenna didn't look convinced, but she didn't press the issue. Instead, she went upstairs to change clothes, and I heard her talking on the phone in hushed tones. That evening, she announced that she was going out with Nina for drinks. Girl time, she said, applying fresh lipstick in the hallway mirror. We need to decompress after this crazy week. Have fun, I told her. Don't do anything I wouldn't do. She laughed, but it sounded forced. Don't wait up. After she left, I sat in my living room and tried to figure out my next move. The anonymous texts had stopped, which probably meant that Nina was too busy consoling Jenna about the car incident to focus on tormenting me. But I knew it was only a matter of time before they escalated things further. I was right. Saturday morning, I woke up to find my truck's tires slashed and "loser" spray-painted across the windshield in bright red letters. It was clearly visible from the street, which meant all of our neighbors would see it. I stood in my driveway, looking at the damage and feeling that familiar cold anger building in my chest. This was no longer about Jenna's affair. This was about a systematic campaign to humiliate and isolate me. As I was taking photos of the damage for insurance purposes, my neighbor, Mrs. Peterson, came over from across the street. Oh my goodness, Martin. What happened? Vandals, I said, trying to sound more upset than angry. Probably just kids. But Mrs. Peterson was looking at me with the kind of expression that suggested she thought there might be more to the story. Have you been having any problems with anyone lately? The question was loaded. Mrs. Peterson was one of those neighborhood busybodies who knew everyone's business. If rumors were already starting to circulate about my marriage, she would have heard them. Not that I can think of, I lied. Just wrong place, wrong time, I guess. She nodded sympathetically, but I could see the wheels turning in her head. By evening, half the neighborhood would know that something was going on with the Graves family. I called my insurance company and arranged for the truck to be towed to a repair shop. Then I called Sam at O'Malley's. I need to borrow your car, I told him. Mine's been vandalized. Jesus, Marty. This is getting serious. Maybe you should call the police. And tell them what? That my wife is cheating on me and someone doesn't like how I'm handling it? They'll laugh me out of the station. Sam was quiet for a moment. Come on down to the bar. We need to talk. O'Malley's was nearly empty when I arrived, just a couple of regulars nursing beers and watching a baseball game on the old television above the bar. Sam poured me a whiskey without being asked. This isn't random, he said, leaning against the bar. Someone's orchestrating this whole thing. The question is why. I told him about Nina and her history with my business. Sam listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding or asking clarifying questions. So you think she's pulling the strings? He said when I finished, using your wife's affair as a weapon against you. It makes sense, I replied. She gets her revenge on me, and she gets to play the supportive friend to Jenna. Win-win for her. Sam refilled my glass. So, what are you going to do about it? That was the million-dollar question. I could confront Nina directly, but that would just give her more ammunition to use against me. I could try to expose the affair, but without solid proof, It would just look like the desperate accusations of a jealous husband, or I could play their game better than they were playing it. I'm going to give them what they want, I said finally. Sam raised an eyebrow. Which is, they want me to look like a loser. They want me to be the villain in their story. So I'm going to be the best damn villain they've ever seen. I spent the rest of the weekend planning. By Monday morning, I had a strategy that would have made Nina proud, if she weren't going to be on the receiving end of it. The first step was gathering evidence. I knew Jenna kept important documents in a file cabinet in our home office, including financial records and correspondence. While she was at work, I went through everything systematically. What I found was even better than I'd hoped for. Hidden in a folder marked Personal Development were printed emails between Jenna and Ethan going back 3 months. They were explicit, detailed, and left no doubt about the nature of their relationship. But more importantly, they revealed that Jenna's promotion had been directly tied to her willingness to sleep with Ethan, who apparently had more influence at the company than his job title suggested. There were also financial documents showing that Jenna had been secretly moving money from our joint accounts into a private account that I didn't know existed. She was preparing for a divorce and making sure she'd have resources when it happened. But the most interesting discovery was a handwritten note from Nina, apparently passed to Jenna during a meeting. He says the promotion is guaranteed if you keep M in the dark for another month. After that, it won't matter what he knows. Stick to the plan. I photographed everything with my phone, then carefully put the documents back exactly where I'd found them. Now I had proof of the affair, the financial deception, and Nina's involvement in the conspiracy. It was time to start fighting back. My first target was Ethan Beck's reputation. If he wanted to play games with other men's wives, he was going to learn that actions have consequences. I started by creating a fake email account and sending anonymous tips to the HR department at Hartwell & Associates. The messages were carefully worded to sound like they came from a concerned employee who had witnessed inappropriate behavior between Ethan and Jenna. I think you should know that Mr. Beck has been having an inappropriate relationship with Mrs. Graves, and it appears to have influenced her recent promotion, read one message. This kind of favoritism creates a hostile work environment for the rest of us. I sent similar messages to several other employees at the company, using information I'd gathered from their public social media profiles to make the emails seem authentic. Within days, I could tell that word was spreading through the office. Jenna came home Tuesday evening looking stressed and agitated. "Everything okay at work?" I asked innocently. "There are some rumors going around," she said carefully. "People with too much time on their hands and not enough to do." "What kind of rumors?" She hesitated. "Nothing important, just office politics." But I could see the worry in her eyes. The anonymous emails were having their intended effect. My next move was more direct. I drove to Ethan's apartment complex, a trendy development near downtown that catered to young professionals with more money than sense. His BMW was parked in its assigned spot, looking pristine despite the recent vandalism. I waited until after midnight, then used a small screwdriver to remove the valve stems from all 4 of his tires. It was quieter than slashing them, and it would take him longer to figure out what had happened. I also used a permanent marker to write "Home Wrecker" on his driver's side window, but in letters small enough that he might not notice them immediately. As a finishing touch, I left a copy of one of his explicit emails to Jenna under his windshield wiper, with a note attached. "Your neighbors might find this interesting reading. Wednesday morning, Jenna got a phone call that left her pale and shaken. Ethan's car was vandalized again," she told me after hanging up. This time they left personal things. Personal things? Private correspondence. Someone's been reading his emails. I made appropriate sympathetic noises, but inside I was celebrating. The psychological pressure was working exactly as I'd hoped. That evening, Jenna announced that she was going to stay late at the office to work on a project. "I might be very late," she said. "Don't wait up." But instead of going to the office or the motel, she went to Nina's apartment. I followed at a safe distance and watched as the 2 women sat on Nina's balcony, drinking wine and talking intensely. Even from across the parking lot, I could see the stress in their body language. They were starting to crack. Thursday brought a new development. I received a phone call from Detective Ray Morrison of the local police department. "Mr. Graves, I'd like to ask you a few questions about some recent vandalism incidents involving a Mr. Ethan Beck." My heart rate spiked, but I kept my voice calm. "I'm not sure how I can help you, Detective." "I don't really know Mr. Beck very well. He works with your wife, doesn't he?" "Yes, but I've only met him a few times at company functions." "I see. Well, Mr. Beck seems to think there might be a personal motive behind these incidents. He mentioned that you seemed upset at a recent party." I forced myself to laugh. "Upset?" "Detective, my wife just got a major promotion. I couldn't be happier for her. If Mr. Beck got a different impression. Maybe he misunderstood my sense of humor. There was a pause. Your sense of humor? My wife gave me a gag gift at the party, a t-shirt that said, "The loser of the house." I played along with the joke, but maybe Mr. Beck thought I was actually upset about it. I see. And where were you last Tuesday night between midnight and 2 a.m.? I had prepared for this question. I was at O'Malley's bar until about 1:30, then I went home. You can check with Sam Kowalski, the owner. He'll remember because I helped him close up. This was true. I had been at O'Malley's that night, but I'd left at 11:30, not 1:30. Sam would cover for me if asked, but hopefully it wouldn't come to that. All right, Mr. Graves. Thank you for your time. We'll be in touch if we need anything else. After hanging up, I immediately called Sam. The cops might ask you about Tuesday night, I told him. If they do, remember that I helped you close up around 1:30. Jesus, Marty. What did you do? Nothing that he didn't deserve, but I need you to back me up on this. Sam was quiet for a long moment. You're playing with fire here. I know, but I'm not going to let them destroy me without fighting back. That evening, Jenna was unusually quiet during dinner. She kept checking her phone and seemed distracted. Something wrong? I asked. The police talked to Ethan today about the vandalism. They think it might be someone with a personal grudge. That's terrible. Any idea who would have a grudge against him? She looked at me carefully. They talked to you too, didn't they? I nodded. Detective Morrison called this afternoon. I told him I barely know Ethan and can't imagine why anyone would target him. Where were you Tuesday night? The question hung in the air between us. This was the moment of truth. If I lied convincingly, I could maintain my cover. If I slipped up, everything would unravel. I was at O'Malley's until late, then came home and went to bed. Why? Just wondering. But her expression suggested she didn't entirely believe me. That night, I lay awake listening to Jenna toss and turn beside me. I could practically hear the wheels turning in her head as she tried to figure out if her husband was the one tormenting her lover. The irony wasn't lost on me. For months, she'd been lying to me about where she was and what she was doing. Now she was experiencing the same uncertainty and suspicion that I'd been living with. It felt like justice. Friday morning brought another anonymous text, the first one I'd received since the truck vandalism. Getting sloppy, loser. The police are asking questions. But this time, instead of feeling threatened, I felt vindicated. The message confirmed what I'd suspected. Nina was behind the harassment campaign, and she was starting to panic as my counterattack gained momentum. I decided it was time to take the gloves off completely. I spent Friday afternoon at the public library using their computers to research everything I could find about Nina Walsh's personal life. Social media, public records, professional associations, anything that might give me leverage. What I discovered was better than I'd hoped for. Nina had been married briefly in her 20s, but the marriage had ended in a messy divorce involving allegations of adultery. She'd also had a series of relationships with married men, including at least 2 affairs with coworkers that had resulted in workplace scandals. More recently, she'd been posting photos on Instagram that suggested she was living well beyond her means. Designer clothes, expensive vacations, luxury cars, all on an HR director's salary. Either she had family money, or she was supplementing her income in ways that might not withstand scrutiny. But the most interesting discovery was a series of negative reviews she'd posted online about local businesses, including several that seemed motivated by personal grudges rather than legitimate complaints. She had a pattern of using her position and connections to hurt people who crossed her. I was dealing with a professional manipulator, someone who had made a career out of destroying other people's lives. The question was how to turn her own weapons against her. Saturday morning, I put my plan into action. First, I created several fake social media accounts using photos and information I'd gathered from various sources. Then I began posting detailed anonymous reviews about Nina's professional conduct, her history of workplace affairs, and her pattern of vindictive behavior. The reviews were carefully crafted to sound like they came from different people, former coworkers, ex-boyfriends, disgruntled clients, but they all told the same story. Nina Walsh was a toxic person who used her position to hurt others. Next, I sent anonymous tips to the IRS about her suspicious lifestyle and potential unreported income. I also sent information to her employer's ethics hotline about her history of inappropriate relationships with coworkers. Finally, I prepared for the confrontation I knew was coming. Saturday evening, Jenna announced that she was going out with Nina again. We need to discuss some work issues, she said, but her tone suggested it was more personal than professional. Have fun, I replied. I'll probably be in the garage working on Mrs. Johnson's transmission. But instead of working on the transmission, I drove to Nina's apartment complex and waited. Sure enough, both women arrived within minutes of each other. I watched them go inside, then positioned myself where I could see Nina's balcony. They were clearly agitated, gesturing emphatically and occasionally raising their voices. I couldn't hear the words, but their body language told me everything I needed to know. They were scared, angry, and turning on each other. After about an hour, Jenna stormed out of the apartment and drove away. Nina remained on the balcony, talking on her phone and pacing back and forth. 20 minutes later, Ethan's BMW pulled into the parking lot. I watched as he went up to Nina's apartment, and the three of them, Nina, Ethan, and presumably Jenna, who must have returned, had what appeared to be a heated argument on the balcony. This was my chance. I drove home quickly and called Jenna's cell phone. "Hi, honey," I said when she answered. "I was just wondering when you'd be home." I thought we might watch a movie together. There was a pause, and I could hear voices in the background. "I'm still out with Nina," she said finally. "It might be late." "Okay, no problem. Is that Ethan I hear in the background? Tell him I said hi." Another pause, longer this time. What? I thought I heard Ethan's voice. "If you're all hanging out together, that's fine. I just wanted to know when to expect you home." "I have to go," she said quickly and hung up. Perfect. Now she knew that I knew about the three-way conspiracy, but she couldn't be sure how much I actually knew or what I planned to do about it. Sunday morning, I woke up to find Jenna already gone. There was a note on the kitchen table. "Gone to church with Nina. Back this afternoon." Jenna hadn't been to church in 5 years. I spent the morning organizing all the evidence I'd gathered, the printed emails, the financial records, the photos of the vandalized cars, the anonymous text messages. Everything was carefully documented and organized in a way that told a clear story. Then I drove to Kinko's and made multiple copies of everything. Sunday afternoon, Jenna came home looking exhausted and defeated. Her makeup was smudged, her hair was disheveled, and she had the look of someone who'd been crying. "How was church?" I asked. "Fine," she said without looking at me. "I need to take a shower." While she was upstairs, her phone rang. The caller ID showed it was Ethan. I let it go to voicemail, but I could hear him leaving a message from across the room. He sounded panicked. That evening, we sat through the most uncomfortable dinner of our 23-year marriage. Jenna picked at her food and avoided eye contact. I made small talk about the weather and the neighbors, acting like nothing had changed. Finally, she broke. "Martin, we need to talk." "About what?" "About us. About our marriage. About everything." I set down my fork and looked at her. "I'm listening." She took a deep breath. "I think we both know that things haven't been good between us for a while. Maybe it's time to consider other options." "Other options?" "Separation, maybe divorce. I think we'd both be happier if we weren't trying to force something that isn't working anymore." I nodded thoughtfully. "You might be right. When did you start feeling this way?" "It's been gradual," she said, still not meeting my eyes. "But especially since I got the promotion, I've been thinking about what I want my future to look like." "And I'm not part of that future?" "I think we want different things now. I'm focused on my career, and you're still trying to figure out what comes next after the business failed." The casual cruelty of that statement took my breath away. She was rewriting our history, making me the failure and herself the victim of my inadequacy. "I see," I said calmly. "And I suppose you've already thought about the practical details?" "Division of assets, living arrangements, that sort of thing." She looked surprised by my calm reaction. "We could work those things out. I'm sure we can be civilized about it." "Oh, I'm sure we can. In fact, I think you'll find that I'm full of surprises when it comes to being civilized." Something in my tone must have worried her, because she finally looked directly at me. "What do you mean?" I smiled. "Nothing, honey. I just mean that I want what's best for both of us, and I think you're going to get exactly what you deserve." The next morning, I put the final phase of my plan into motion. I started by calling the local newspaper and asking to speak with their investigative reporter. Then I called the television station's news tip line. Finally, I called Detective Morrison. "Detective, this is Martin Graves. I think I have some information that might be relevant to your investigation of the Ethan Beck vandalism case." "I'm listening, Mr. Graves." "I've discovered that my wife has been having an affair with Mr. Beck, and I believe that might be connected to the vandalism incidents. I think someone is trying to make it look like I'm responsible in order to discredit me." "That's a serious accusation, Mr. Graves. Do you have any evidence?" "I have emails, financial records, and documentation of a conspiracy involving my wife, Mr. Beck, and a woman named Nina Walsh, who works in HR at their company. I think Miss Walsh has been orchestrating a harassment campaign against me as part of a larger scheme." There was a long pause. Mr. Graves, I think you'd better come down to the station and bring that evidence with you. 2 hours later, I was sitting in Detective Morrison's office, spreading out copies of documents across his desk. The detective's expression grew more serious as he reviewed each piece of evidence. "This is quite a story, Mr. Graves," he said finally. "If these documents are authentic, we're looking at potential charges of harassment, conspiracy, and possibly fraud, depending on how the promotion was handled." "The documents are authentic," I assured him, "and I think you'll find that this goes deeper than just a simple affair." Detective Morrison leaned back in his chair. "Mr. Graves, I have to ask, did you vandalize Mr. Beck's car?" I looked him straight in the eye. "Detective, I've been the victim of a systematic campaign of harassment and humiliation. My truck was vandalized, I've been receiving threatening text messages, and my wife and her conspirators have been trying to destroy my reputation and my marriage. If someone has been making Mr. Beck's life difficult, I'd say he's getting a taste of his own medicine." It wasn't exactly a denial, but it wasn't an admission either. Detective Morrison seemed to understand the distinction. "I see. Well, Mr. Graves, based on this evidence, I think we need to have some conversations with Ms. Walsh and Mr. Beck. In the meantime, I'd suggest you be very careful. If these people are as vindictive as you say, they might escalate things when they realize you're fighting back. Don't worry, Detective. I can take care of myself." That afternoon, the local newspaper published a story about corruption and favoritism at Hartwell and Associates, based on the information I'd provided. The television station ran a similar story on the evening news. By Tuesday morning, Nina Walsh was on administrative leave pending an investigation, and Ethan Beck had been suspended without pay. And Jenna? Jenna came home Monday night looking like she'd seen a ghost. "You did this," she said, standing in our living room with her hands clenched into fists. "You destroyed everything." I looked up from the newspaper, where I'd been reading about the scandal at her company. "I destroyed everything? That's interesting, coming from someone who's been planning to divorce me for months while stealing money from our joint accounts." Her face went white. "How did you know about the secret bank account?" "The emails with your lover. The conspiracy with Nina to make me look like a pathetic loser so you could justify leaving me?" I folded the newspaper carefully. "Honey, I've known about all of it for weeks. The only question was what I was going to do about it. You had no right to go through my private things." I stood up slowly. "And you had no right to cheat on me, steal from me, and conspire to humiliate me. But here we are." She was crying now, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of rage and frustration. "You've ruined my career, my promotion, my reputation, everything I worked for." "No, Jenna, you ruined your career when you decided to sleep your way to a promotion. I just made sure everyone knew the truth about it." "What do you want?" she whispered. I walked over to our closet and pulled out the t-shirt she'd given me at the party. "The loser of the house," I read aloud. "You know what, honey? You were right. I was the loser. I was losing my wife, my self-respect, and my dignity, and I was too stupid to fight back." I held up the shirt. "But I'm not the loser anymore. You are. You lost your job, your reputation, and your future with your boyfriend. You lost your co-conspirator and your credibility. And most importantly, you lost any chance of taking me for everything I'm worth in a divorce." I tossed the shirt at her feet. "Congratulations, Jenna. You're officially the loser of the house." She stared at the shirt, then looked back up at me with an expression of pure hatred. "This isn't over," she said. I smiled. "Yes, it is. Pack your bags. You've got 24 hours to get out of my house." "Your house?" "This is our house. Actually, it's my house. Check the deed. I bought it before we got married, and it never went into joint ownership, just like the truck, the tools, and most of our other assets. You might want to call a lawyer, but I think you'll find that your options are pretty limited." She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it again. The reality of her situation was finally sinking in. "Where am I supposed to go?" "I hear Nina's looking for a roommate." "Oh, wait, she's probably going to be evicted when she can't make rent without her job. Well, I'm sure you'll figure something out. You're very resourceful." The next 24 hours were the longest of my life, but also the most satisfying. Jenna packed her belongings in a fury, throwing things into boxes and suitcases while muttering under her breath about lawyers and revenge. But her threats were empty, and we both knew it. The evidence of her affair and financial deception would make any divorce proceeding a nightmare for her. Her best bet was to take whatever I was willing to give her and disappear quietly. On Wednesday evening, she loaded the last of her belongings into her car and stood in our driveway for a moment, looking back at the house we'd shared for over 2 decades. "I loved you once," she said quietly. "I know," I replied. I loved you too. But love isn't enough when there's no respect, no trust, and no honesty. She got in her car and drove away without looking back. I stood in my driveway, watching her taillights disappear around the corner, and felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. The next morning, I got a call from Detective Morrison. Mr. Graves, I wanted to let you know that we've made arrests in the harassment case. Miss Walsh has been charged with stalking and conspiracy, and she's admitted to sending the anonymous text messages and vandalizing your truck. What about the vandalism to Mr. Beck's car? There was a pause. The investigation is ongoing, but given Ms. Walsh's confession to the other incidents, we're considering the possibility that she was responsible for all of the vandalism as part of her campaign against you. I see. Well, I'm just glad the truth is finally coming out. Yes, sir. Justice has a way of working itself out, doesn't it? It certainly does, Detective. It certainly does. 6 months later, I was sitting in O'Malley's, sharing a beer with Sam and reading about Nina Walsh's sentencing in the local paper. She'd gotten 2 years probation and a restraining order that kept her away from me permanently. Ethan Beck had left town shortly after losing his job, and rumor had it he was working at a used car lot in another state. Jenna had moved in with her sister in California and was working as a receptionist at a dental office. As for me, I'd used the insurance money from my vandalized truck to buy better tools for my garage, and word of mouth had brought me more repair work than I could handle. I was making more money fixing cars than I'd ever made in the IT business. You know what the best part is? I told Sam, raising my beer in a toast. What's that? I never did figure out who vandalized Ethan's car, but whoever it was, I owe them a drink. Sam grinned and clinked his bottle against mine. Here's to mystery heroes and poetic justice. And here's to not being the loser of the house anymore. We drank to that, and for the first time in years, I felt like a winner.